לרב, הוא צריך להתחיל את הפגישה. אוקיי. אז עכשיו, את רואה את המיקרופון הקטן?
Good morning. How we all doing?
Very good, thanks.
Good, good. Illy, how we doing? Everything's good. Everyone's got their coffee? Okay. Good deal. I will be right back. Okay. For some reason, Peter's having a hard time getting admitted. It seems like the connection is doing weird things today. Okay. Well, Mira Atnim Seth.
Good morning.
Good morning, Francis. I can't get Peter in. This is weird.
Is he using an old link, or is he using the one from the email today?
It should. I mean, if he's showing up here, right? I don't think that would be a problem.
I had some issues connecting this morning or just now.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it keeps disappearing. Here's Ruth.
Hi.
Shalom, Zamira.
Shalom.
There we have Ruth, maybe. Some people are having trouble connecting. Well, hopefully it won't be too distracting, and I'll keep admitting Peter as we go through. So today we look at an interesting Mishnah, an interesting teaching from Pirkei Avot, which is really two teachings smushed together that are pretty unrelated one to the other, except that the two rabbis who are teaching come from the same time frame, the same generation in rabbinic or ancient Israel. And so I wanted to give just a little background there before we get going. Okay, well, okay, we're going to share the screen here. And let's look at the first sentence or the first phrase. Rabbi Levitas Ish Yavne Omer. So Rabbi Levitas it says Ish Yavne, a man of Yavne, just telling us where he is from. He would teach, and then he has his teaching. Ma'od ma'od heve shafal ruach. Be very, very low of spirit. Shetikvat enosh, for the hope of humanity, rima, is a worm. Okay? And then we go on to Rabbi Yochanan, a teaching of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Now, both of them were what's called the third generation of Tanaim. There we go. That didn't work. So the third generation of Tanaim, right? The third generation of rabbis who are the primary authors of the material that's in the Mishnah. Okay? And let's just talk about Yavne for a moment, because I think that helps us get a little situation, a little location going on. Here is a map of Palestine, or ancient Israel, under the king called Herod. So in the time frame of the Romans, before, around the lifespan of Hillel and of Shammai, and in later time of Jesus. So let's locate this place called Yavne on the map. And if we're looking, we're not going to see a name directly as Yavne, because in this time period it had a slightly different name. It's Yamnia, right here. And you'll notice Yamnia is on the coast. It's south of Yafo, modern day Tel Aviv, right here in Yavne and Yofa, and Yamina, which is Yavna, north of Ashkelon, which is right here. Okay? So why is knowing that he's from Yavna important? So this gets into the myth, the kind of the legend about the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism. You might have heard of the kind of the fights, the tension, the battles between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. These are especially recorded in the New Testament and other places, or of the other groups at that time, like the Essenes. The Monty Python troupe did a great send-up of this time period, right, in the life of Brian, which was really hysterical and somewhat historically accurate, so it was really helpful. There was a lot of infighting in the Jewish community, or in the whatever we want to call that community at that time. And the way the Jewish legend goes, there was such infighting that someone betrayed the Jewish cause to the Romans, and that was what led to the destruction of Jerusalem. We won't go into that here. That's kind of a side story. And also it's more of a legend than a history. But the result of that story is that a rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, was sneaked out, or snuck out, supposedly, of Jerusalem by his students in a casket, as if he had died and they were carrying him to be buried. So why did they have to sneak him out of Jerusalem? Well, there would be two possible threats. One would be the Romans, who had surrounded Jerusalem and had laid siege to Jerusalem. But the other would be the zealots, or the more militaristic people in Jerusalem at the time, who didn't want anyone to betray their cause, and would go as far as to execute or assassinate people who they perceived as being against them. Now, this is a time period where it's really hard to have actual history, right? We're relying upon people who wrote with the intention of, and I don't think it was a negative intention, but they were trying to shape the history, shape the way the story was told. So it wasn't that they were going necessarily for accuracy, or not necessarily. They usually were not going for accuracy. They represent things that have historical truth to them, but were told in ways that we can't really rely upon 100%. So according to one of the stories of Josephus, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was snuck out, and according to the Mishnah, he was snuck out, and he pleads with the Roman general, says, Vespasian, please do whatever, leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone. Just let me have the city of Yavna and my students. Right? He's saying, I've got no itch to fight you. I'm not going for independence. All I want is to be able to be left alone to study and to teach and to kind of take care of my people. And he asks for the city of Yavna, which is right down here, called Yamnia, at this time frame. Okay? So Jerusalem is here, right where I am, right? And Yamnia is there. It's not nearly as close as that looks in many ways, because Jerusalem is up in the mountains, and Yamnia is right by the sea, right? So Yavna is right by the sea, so they feel very far apart. So Yavna is where rabbinic Judaism is first planted, where the rabbis first start to teach and to create the traditions that live on and are interpreted and reinterpreted till today. It's interesting, to look at that story and to think about what are the bigger messages that are coming out of it. One is clearly that, as opposed to their teacher, Rabbi Akiva, who endorsed the rebellion and even perhaps anointed Bar Kokhba as the Messiah. Bar Kokhba is the one who led the second rebellion, and led to a lot of destruction in Jerusalem. That as opposed to him being politically involved and in terms of the military, they were saying, we will no longer do that. We will be under others' political authority because trying to be independent has led to our destruction, and we are going to do what we need to do to get by in order to protect our tradition. And that's generally the mode for the next 1800 years. Okay? So that's an important part of the story. Whether it's historically true or not, the weight of that message is one that's very important to be aware of when it comes to the study of rabbinic texts. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. So he is from Yavna, a third generation Tana, or right, a teacher from who could have been recorded in the Mishnah. And that's somewhere at the end of the second, beginning of the third century of the Common Era. Like 180 to 240, something like that, I believe. Now, Yavna is not the center place of Rabbinic Judaism very long. And I just want to show that so that you can see, because somewhat quickly there become really two center places of Rabbinic Judaism. One is the Galilee, here around Tiberia, right? This is the Kinneret, and this is Tiberia, or Tiberias, the city on the lake. And this is a place where many early rabbis live and develop Rabbinic Judaism. And then the other is not on this map, and that would be way over here in Babylonia, in Babel. And then we have, from the year 300 on, we have kind of two competing centers, and slowly the one in Babylonia takes over, and the one here in Israel becomes secondary. Okay? Any questions about all that? That's a lot. Okay, so the two teachings we're going to look at today come from Yavna, two teachers who were in Yavna, and we can ask ourselves, does the history that we were talking about, or that I was explaining, affect our understanding of the Mishnah at all? Still trying to get Peter Gutman. Oh, can't get him in here. Okay. So when we look here, things to know about Rabbi Levitas, other than he's from Yavna, are that this is the only quotation of him in the Mishnah. Hold on, let me just text Peter.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, please do. If you could just get closer to the microphone, Margaret, it's a little hard to hear you.
Is a Mishnah a book?
Yeah, so the Mishnah is, to call it a book depends on what you mean by a book.
Well, to get all these quotes from the rabbi, well, are they in a book?
Just one sec.
I think she meant a current day book.
Not working. So it depends what we mean by book. If we mean by like that, a book on the shelf, then no, because like books were not invented for another over 1,000 years, right?
Right.
There were folios and whatnot. But if what we mean by a book is that it was written down, right? Then yes, and that's one of the things One of the things I talked about in Rabbi Boot Camp the past couple of weeks is that transition to writing down the oral Torah, right? That the Mishnah and the Talmud are called the oral Torah, and they are the dramatic thing about the rabbis is that they write them down. So they are written down, and that way they are in a book, Margaret. But and I think Lee might have actually been pointing to, because I see 6 volumes up there, an actual edition of the Mishnah. And you can see that there are, although I'm counting, is that a?
It's 7 because it's got the appendix.
Oh, okay, it's got the appendix. So it's 6 volumes of Mishnah, one for each of the orders, one Seder, right? And then one index at the back.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, so yes, it's been available and printed as a book for a long time, or books really. Although you can find single volumes. They're usually very hard to read because the print is so small, because they're so thick.
Right. I just wondered when you said Mishnah. I just thought, is it?
Yeah. So the Mishnah is the entirety of the work. That's 6 orders. Each order has a number of a number of books, or you could call books or chapters, masechtot.
Yeah, you answered my question.
Okay, no problem.
But you can go on. Yeah.
So this is Rabbi Levitas's only entry. And perhaps that has a little bit of bearing on the teaching. Right? He's so humble, he's only mentioned in the Mishnah once.
Right.
So oftentimes, right, we have the saying that the exception proves the rule. Can anyone think of a good example of the exception proving the rule? That teaching? Isn't it funny how like that saying will roll off our tongues all the time when we need to, but it's hard to come up with an example? That's called human nature, I guess. Okay. Well, let's. If anyone comes up with an example as we're talking, go right ahead and raise it or share it with us. So here we have Rabbi Levitas, right? Who's telling us to be exceedingly humble, except because the hope of humanity is a worm. So why would I bring up the idea of the exception proving the rule? Well, oftentimes, especially in rabbinic teaching, the middle path is referred to as the golden path. Right? The middle path, which is not of extremes. Right? That we should not be too extreme to one side or to the other, but we should find the wisdom of both and find a course that charts the middle. We're familiar with that idea?
Yes.
Right? Okay. So here, Rabbi Levitas is saying, okay, maybe if we can attach to him the idea as well, against his will, that the middle path is the way to go, right? The golden mean, except when it comes to humility. That humility is the one place where we should be extreme, and that proves the rule. right? That everyone else, every place else, be moderate, but with regards to humility, be exceedingly humble. Me'od me'od heve, right? Be very, very humble. So, is that sensible? Do you think that being that humble is a wise course of action? Is a question we want to think about. But before we get there, we also want to think about before whom is Rabbi Levitas, like, what might he mean, or what does he mean when he says be exceedingly humble? Does he mean before everyone? Does he mean before God?
I think it's before.
Or something in between? Lee?
Oh.
This is Fran. Recognizing his situation where he cannot control his surroundings,
Mm-hmm.
he has to be humble because, and I think it's before others, not just God, because he's in a new situation. He doesn't know where the path is going.
Okay, so let's attach knowledge of his political circumstances, that he doesn't have control over his own
No.
surroundings.
Or his destiny.
Okay. What about the inspiration for his teaching? Although I'm not sure if inspiration is the right word, right? To say that the hope of tikvat enosh rima, that the hope of humanity is a worm.
But the whole like reason that there's rabbis in Yavne, and presumably in that frame, rabbis at all, was someone who snuck out and essentially humbled themselves in front of the political power.
Oh, okay, right. So they know that the only reason that they have what they have is because they were humble and they did not. I hate to use this phrase in such a hackneyed way, but they decided that Jerusalem was not the hill they were going to die upon. Right? Everyone's familiar with that phrase. Like, when it comes to an argument, if you say, well, you know what, this is not the hill I want to die on, or you ask someone else, is this the hill you really want to die on? Do you really want to make your stand on this issue, right? So I guess since Jerusalem is actually a mountain, it's a little bit weird to apply it in that situation, but there we go. Okay, so we have the politics, we have the knowledge of what got them there, which was humility. But let's focus on these last three words. Tikvat enosh rima. Hope of humanity is a worm. Does that sound like the teachings we've been reading in the past chapter of Pirkei Avot? Right, for example, if we go to chapter 3, verse Mishnah 1,
Mhm.
oh,
Sorry, Ma. Yeah, it's a callback.
right, it's a little bit of a callback. So Lee, say more about that.
In 3:1, they say, right, talking about essentially, knowing about God, right? Right, from where do you come, from a putrid drop? Where are you going? To a place of dust, of worm, and of maggot. And it uses the word rima in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so this is talking about your standing before God. that your ultimate destination is a decomposing body in the ground.
Exactly. But how does this Mishnah end that's different than how Rabbi Levitas's teaching ends?
The one in 3:1,
Yeah.
right? That right, you give an account and a reckoning. You stand before God.
Right. So there's something that's right that yeah you're going to decompose, but there is something that goes on, some spiritual accounting, some spiritual encounter with God that will happen once you've died. Now he gives it here kind of as a wake up and take notice kind of a teaching, right? Like don't forget, even when once you die and you no longer have a physical life, you're still going to have to give an accounting of yourself to God, right? But Rabbi Levitas, right? It's just worm. That's your hope.
Yeah.
Which one? So if we have just the worm and no mentioning of God or any kind of connection after, does one seem more hopeful than the other, or sound more hopeful to you than the other?
Hi.
Zamira,
Yes, may I say something?
please.
Okay. It's a very simple thing. It just tells us, as human beings, no matter who we are and what we are and what position we have, we end up like anybody else, that the worms are eating us when we die.
Absolutely. So absolutely, Zamira. So the question though is, when Akavia ben Mehalalel, it's a fun name to say,
Parallel.
Mehalalel, when Akavia ben Mehalalel, okay, I'm going to get it right the third time. When Akavia ben Mahalalel, that's how it's written for me, Mahalalel, okay? When he says his teaching about going to the grave and there's a worm that's going to basically eat your body, but he adds to it in the end, you will give an accounting of your life to God. Now, Akavia is living, he's like supposedly around the time of Hillel, or a little bit after Hillel. So it's when the temple still stands, it's when Jerusalem still exists. And I guess what I'm wondering is, when you hear the idea of giving an accounting before God, as opposed to, and let me put it this way, we could say your body will become a worm, will be eaten by a worm, but you will enjoy a spiritual life in an amusement park for eternity. I'm just saying, like, I don't know why amusement park came to mind, but there's some hope of some existence after that's of a spiritual nature, right? Well, that sounds a lot more optimistic than you're going to have to give an accounting of your life to God, right? Because giving an accounting of your life to God should make you worry about each and every moment and whether or not you can survive that accounting. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of those two options, one, like I hate to say amusement park, but the heaven, let's just say paradise existence, right? That is much more sunny than you're going to have to give an accounting of your life to God, right? However, if we leave off the paradise for now, and we just have an accounting of your life before God, right? Your body is going to be consumed by the earth, but you will have an opportunity to give an accounting of your life before God. Do you see that as more optimistic or less optimistic than you're going to die and that's it? Which is what we seem to be getting here from Rabbi Levitas.
Well, I think Ecclesiastic says if you're going to die, and that's it, eat, drink, and be merry.
Well, I'm just asking you, though, Francis, which one makes the most sense to you?
Well, the one that's more hopeful is that you have an existence. Yeah. But if you're humble all the time, and you're going to be humble before God, you're halfway there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I must, so when it comes to, so I guess, Francis, what I hear you saying is that some sort of eternal existence, of course, is more optimistic.
Yes.
I don't know if, do you take the idea of giving an accounting to God as being an indication of some sort of eternal existence?
In the Christian faith, yes.
Okay.
But we also have an accounting.
Yeah.
I read this a little bit differently.
Please, bring it on, Lee.
So maybe it's just me, but I tend to read the rabbis as having a bit of a sarcastic bent to them.
Okay.
And if we're talking about a period in which the power of Rome over Judea is at its zenith, this idea of doesn't matter how powerful you are because the ultimate fate of every human is in the ground.
Yeah.
And so humility is a better, and hearkening back to Pirkei Avot 3:1, the whole idea of giving a reckoning is one of the things that's supposed to keep you from Aveirah, from transgression.
Yep.
But it's not necessarily a reward. It's, remember that, you are not, humans aren't the end all be all of everything. And so, it's almost like a backhanded sort of throwing shade, to use a modern term, at the Romans, and then also at the students who are, presumably interacting with some Romans who are very happy, right? And saying, just remember, it's fine that you're, humble, because ultimately we all end up in the ground. And we know, because when the rabbis quote things, they never quote the full thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because he doesn't have the, before whom you give an accounting, it's possible that he and other, rabbis and their students knew that when he was referencing back to, a kavya, they thought about the full thing.
Possible, yeah. Although usually that applies when they're quoting the Tanakh, like when they're quoting the Hebrew Bible,
Mm-hmm.
more so than when they're quoting each other. I mean, in this way, right? Because what I mean by that is, if they're quoting each other in a conversation, then yes. But here, this is his teaching, right? It's the one time he's quoted. At the same time, right, it wasn't hard for us to make that connection in our minds. And so I think you're right that it's likely that you would read this about the worm and think about the cheshbon, right? To think about the accounting that one has to give according to a kavya. Sue.
Yes. When I got the background that you provided in terms of there being all these different movements going on, some of which were political, some of which were, in terms of purifying yourself through correct teachings, I was wondering if it can be also referred to, directed to the students in their movement that they're involved in, to be very humble about whatever this group of teachings and suggested way of life is, because since the hope of humanity is a worm, you don't know if yours is going to prevail or if somebody else has a good teaching that is instead going to come up with a different teacher. And So like when you go off as a small group and try to make yourself perfect and say, well, everybody else is doing it wrong, we're going to do it this way and it's going to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Be humble about even what I'm teaching you, perhaps. Because
Perhaps, right?
civilizations rise and fall, movements, the historical process is that we don't know which way is going to win out or which is going to end up being what's going to prevail.
Mm-hmm.
And you also won't attract anybody to your teachings if you're very arrogant about them.
Well, why don't we look at the second teaching of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka and see if we can tie it back together. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer, he taught, Kol hamechalel shem shemayim beseter, anyone who profanes the name of God in secret, nifra'im mimenu begalui, he shall be punished in the open. Echad shogeg ve'echad mezid, whether he's it happens by mistake or on purpose in his profaning the name, like whether it was an intentional act or a accidental act. Either way, if you profane the name of God in secret, your punishment will be in public.
What you do in the dark shall be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Does that sound pretty harsh?
Is that a
Not
statement
for
from
them.
the New Testament?
This is just a teaching of Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka.
In the Hebrew Bible, is it a statement like that?
I don't think so. Not quite like this.
Okay. Because we have one that says what you do in the dark shall be doing in the light.
Revealed in the light.
Right? That's
Yeah.
why I was asking.
Shouted from the rooftops is the word.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I think to get at the core of Rabbi Yochanan's teaching, we first have to grapple with what is Chilul Hashem? What is a profaning of God's name? Right, we have a ritualistic idea of that. I should say we apply that to ritual, meaning if we do something in the ritual incorrectly, right? If I quote God's name incorrectly, or if we do certain things, it'd be called a Chilul Hashem, a disgracing of God's name. But I think it means a lot more than that as well, in that it means when our actions counter or undermine what we believe to be the will of God in our world.
May I say something?
Yes, Zamira.
Okay. The best example is that when God created the Garden of Eden, and he told them not to touch the tree. And they did it, and they thought nobody sees it, and it was an open secret. I mean, that's the best example.
That's a great example. I would go even further, right? So we've got that example with Adam and Chava, with Adam and Eve. And we have that example again in a more dramatic way, I think. Not that far after that. In the example of Cain and Abel.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Cain strikes down Abel in secret. It's just out in the middle of the field. And Cain pretends like, well, God's not going to know. Right? Right? And my brother's keeper, he might be off, at the beach. Could be at the casino. I don't know. And, but there it's about murder and the taking of life. Right? And God's answer is that your brother's blood calls out to me from the ground. So I think I'm guessing all of us would take that example more seriously than the one in the Garden of Eden. I'm happy for a disagreement on that, right? But when it comes to a chilul Hashem, something that disgraces God's name, well, I think that's a great example, Zamira, of a kind of a ritual idea that we have things we're supposed to do and things we're not supposed to do. And when we do the things we are not supposed to do, that is kind of a profaning of God's name. Yet I think that, well, it's hard to say, right? Because, rabbinically speaking, they say over and over again, be as concerned with a little mitzvah as with a big mitzvah. Right? We saw that in the past couple weeks. Be as concerned with doing a small mitzvah, a minor mitzvah, as you are with a major mitzvah. Meaning, the protection of life is a major mitzvah. And let's say whether or not my cheese is kosher is a minor mitzvah. I'm not sure I don't want to make that kind of distinction. I'm not suggesting that's the distinction that they would have come up with, but, right? And the rabbis over and over caution us to be as concerned about the minor mitzvah as we are about the major mitzvah. So, when Rabbi Yochanan here speaks, I think, I would presume he means any mitzvah. Well, that any profaning of God's name is in secret is going to lead to some sort of punishment in public.
Sounds like the Me Too movement. All these things were done in secret and then boom.
And then revealed in public.
And they're punishable.
Or it all comes out in the wash. By the end of the week, when the sheets get washed, the clothes get washed, we're going to see where you've been and what you've done.
in the wash water, huh? Okay.
So be good and don't do any bad things because somebody knows about it.
Okay. So Zamira, I think that's a great segue. What does it mean to be good?
What does it mean to be good?
Yeah,
Now,
because I think being good is what links together the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan and the teaching of Rabbi Levitas.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What is a bigger thing? Is it if I said that my house is kosher, and I do believe it, and I really try to do it right?
Yeah.
And somebody comes and asks me, is this kosher enough? I said, what do you mean? Is this a mistrust? The mistrust is a bigger sin? Or whatever? Or insulting somebody? You mean, if I tell you that my house is kosher and I don't try to cheat or anything, and you come and you ask me, is this really kosher and so on, like you don't trust me? Is this, what is the bigger sin? To mistrust somebody, to doubt him, or to, if I tell you, you have to trust me. Unless you know me as a liar.
So no, I'm trying to understand, Zamir, your question really fully, because I don't think I'm quite getting it, and how it relates here.
I have a kosher home. Let's say it this way.
Yeah,
okay?
you do have a
You
kosher.
come to my house,
Yeah.
and I tell you, you can eat everything because it's a kosher home. Right?
Yeah,
And
but
you
then do I start asking you questions about, do you do this, do you do that, do you do this?
No, that's beside the point. If you're not Shomer Shabbat, your home is not kosher to begin with. But it doesn't matter. If I said that my house is kosher, you have to trust me. You don't come and ask me all kind of questions like you don't trust me.
Yes,
It's an insult.
I agree.
Okay. So now what's a bigger sin? I say my house is kosher and I'm not trying to fool anybody. But on the other hand, I say also that I'm not Shomer Shabbat. And you come and ask me about, is this kosher? Is this from this butcher, from this space, and so on and so forth. This is an insult. Like you don't trust me. Did you understand now?
I
Am
think so.
clear?
I think so. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to relate it back to the Mishnah, though, Zamira. In that instance, what you're saying is, right? Well, I keep kosher,
Yes.
but I'm not. But there are other things I don't do. And someone is saying, well, because you don't do everything, I have to make sure that you do this thing right.
This is beside the point. The thing is that if I'm trying to cheat somebody and somebody comes to the house and he says, I only eat kosher home. And I'm telling him my home is kosher, but I'm not kosher altogether. This is where המחלל שם שמיים בסתר. Did you understand now what I'm trying to tell you?
But who is Mechalel
You're
Shem
thinking
Shemayim
in a
B'Sefer?
way.
You?
This is a different story.
Okay.
If I want you to come to eat in my house, and I'll try any which way to, that you will come and eat in my house, and even to lie that my house is kosher.
Yeah.
This is the sin.
Of course. So if you misrepresent yourself as one thing when you're doing another, then yeah, that would be certainly right, because first of all, you're saying that you do something that you don't do with regards to your relationship with God, and second of all, you're misrepresenting what you do to another person. Okay. So yeah, that would be a chilul Hashem. That would be a profaning of God's name. And one understanding of this is that it's because you represented yourself as keeping with God and doing what God wants, but secretly you weren't. That because of that hypocrisy, your transgression, your profaning of God's name needs to be revealed in public.
I really think
That's one understanding of Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. Well, here's what let me put it together in terms of my understanding, and I leave it open to you, though, of course.
okay.
What I would say is this, that what they share, what the teaching of Rabbi Levitas and Rabbi Yochanan share, is that there's only one thing that is permanent, that lives on. And the only thing that's permanent that lives on is what we do we could say in God's name, but that's a little problematic. I guess what I mean more is what we say, what we do that is in keeping with God's will for our world. Right? The things that we do, one way or another, that are in line or in tune with the creator of the universe and that powerful force, those things will live on. And the only way we have anything of our own beyond this life is in the ways that we contribute to that power and that force in our world. So Rabbi Levitas is saying, nothing that you have will go beyond this. So do be in tune with that force. And Rabbi Yochanan is saying, like, even if you profane God's name in secret, it's still going to be revealed. Your hypocrisy will be exposed. Right? The only way to have a connection or an existence that lives beyond yourself is to be in tune with God and God's will.
Be good.
Be good.
We would call it transparency.
We can't, right? Transparency is important.
Yeah, you walk the talk.
Exactly, the honesty.
Or integrity.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Integrity.
that's good.
Who said integrity? Sue, okay, great. So, very good. Well, not exactly an inspiring pair of teachings. More of a warning, yeah. But next week we get into something more interesting. So great to see everybody this morning. Next week we move on. And Thursday we'll be doing a 1 hour session, a little bit shorter than an hour hopefully, all about Jewish law. What is Jewish law? How is it? What's comprised of it? And how did it come to be? And how do we work with it today?
What time?
That is Thursday at 12:30.
Okay.
Called Rabbi Boot Camp, but it's right on the website. And tomorrow night, if you're interested, at 7:30, Lena and Vered will be teaching people how to make scones.
How to make what?
Scones.
Scones.
Scones, yeah.
Some say we say scones.
Yes, because Margaret's actually Scottish, so she can say it the right way.
Scones.
Baking.
And she
What
got-
is-
I don't need to sit on that one.
Yeah.
They're
But
good.
they're excellent bakers, and they make a real.
Yeah.
They make a phenomenal scone.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Maybe I should sit in and learn.
You can offer your advice too. Anyway,
When is that on?
Thursday.
that's
Thursday.
tomorrow night at 7:30.
No,
Repeat that again.
Tomorrow night, Wednesday night,
Tuesday night.
7:30.
Right.
And what can you, Rabbi, can you say it in Hebrew, the word?
Scone?
Stars or
Oh.
stone?
אין מילה,
You can say it either way.
אין מילה לדבר כזה בעברית, אני חושב.
Yeah. It's
זה כוכבים ולא אבנים.
לא. זה משהו מפאה. Anyway, it's it's a baked good that I don't think we have a name for it in Hebrew, except probably scone.
Fine.
Tastes delicious
They're,
either
del-
way.
they're, they're delicious, especially right after you've made them.
Yes. Now, if your idea of a scone is what you've eaten at Starbucks,
No,
then
that's
No.
dough.
that's
That's something
like
else.
a bad biscuit. I don't even know what you call it.
Like
Um,
or dough or something. It's not a scone.
It's not a scone.
No.
Exactly. So they're going in a much better direction.
No, I have not had a scone in America from a bakery that was a scone, except up in Seattle. Seattle, there was a place called Three Girls, I think, and they made scones. And then there was Bun on the Run, and they made wonderful scones. But they had gone to England and learned how to do it.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, everybody, Lee, did you have anything you were going to add?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm good.
Everybody be good. Have a good day, and we'll catch up with you later, okay?
Thank you.
And smile.
What, Zamira?
Smile.
Okay. And did you see, Zamira, did you hear about Hank?
What?
Did you hear about Hank?
Oh, yes, I heard about it.
I
There
thought
was-
so, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew.
No, I know.
Last name?
I get all the look.
Yes, you do, I'm sure.
Hank's last name?
Hank's last name?
Yeah.
I always call them, I know it. Do you remember Peter, or you just...
No, I don't remember. That's why I'm asking.
Brott. B-R-O-D-D-T. Sorry, B-R-O-D-T. Brott. Hank Brott.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. He'll truly be missed. Anyway, be good, and I'll catch up with you later.
Later on.
להתראות.